Yeah. Right. Okay. I was like, if I remember it right, he's doing the presentation. He was doing sociology. She was like, you know, this doesn't seem like at least now it would be
Okay, everybody, wrangle them up. Grab your, come on up to the front. Get this thing going. This is the beginning is mercifully short. I just have 3 slides and have to click this thing 5 times. My name's Kevin Lewis. This is Nick Lawson. And yes, it's true. We're wearing confusingly similar shirts to what's on these badges. Is that the shirt you wore?
It might actually be.
This is not the shirt I wore, but it is confusingly similar, so that's great.
So it's like 10-year badge. I know we have different colors.
So blue is less than 5. So there you go. But yeah, you get different colors. Yeah, which they tell us in security training, you should never post your badge on LinkedIn. So all those people are a security risk. this is the first inaugural AWS Louisville meetup, and we wanted to share with you kind of our vision and also the fact that this is flexible and this is going to change, and we want your input. And if there are topics that we're not covering that you want to cover, we'll get into those too. And just assume, we've got basically every resource possible, and we'll figure out how to do it, including the members that are in this room. Come on in, you're coming in. So we're thinking monthly might be the right cadence, at least at first. Maybe like Wednesday, we'll kind of, we thrive on feedback. So we'll take your all's feedback as we go through this thing. We want it to work for everybody, time as well. We hope this does become a community. I actually, in a previous life, I was employee number 411 at Cloudera. And I started the Indianapolis Big Data Meetup. And a lot of the virtuous things that happened there were people were trying to build a company and looking for talent. People working on interesting projects who needed talent. Folks were looking for big data skills. They didn't, Spark was released at that time. And they needed to figure out how to program more of like a streaming context. And that group was driven based off of community action, what they were looking to do. And so we were flexible enough to do it. And we've got the team here to do that as well. We hope you gain skills. So if there's a skill you don't have or something you're trying to explore, a certification you want to get, let's talk about that and bring that up as a part of the group as well. And then, connecting talent to opportunity, learning from each other. We want this to be member driven. We'll facilitate, but there's no reason why the next meetup couldn't be hosted by one of you guys teaching us a cool thing that you've done. Or we can kind of go through a bunch of other things. You ready for my applause line? First round's on me. Right after this at Feast. I know. Thank you, Jeff Bezos. So we want this to be, you guys introduce each other, get to know each other. No one trades business cards, get connected on LinkedIn, ask questions, build a community, do things even hopefully outside of this. Here's our initial curated idea list in no particular order, right? So we have an expert on Redshift who is ready to come in and talk with us when we're ready on that. We actually have a ton of free training and resources. It can be intimidating. Dan, how many certifications do you have?
4 AWS and 7
Nick, how many certifications do you have?
30 AWS.
I have 1. But all these people can teach you how they studied, what they did, what it was like. Dan's a technical account manager, so he has very specific things he's looking to do. Not that you want to be that job maybe, but maybe you do have a lot of the things that, Dan's been down the path. So why not just make it easy for you guys and build a community of talent? It's great for you. It's great for your career, and you can learn something along the way. So networking, resiliency, even like something as simple as managing costs. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and not real sensitive there. Maybe you're running a huge infrastructure and you need to get better at that. But we can talk about certs, training roundtable. We even thought about bringing up a bunch of people from AWS who have a ton of certs and then just having them just open forum and just see what that's like. Security, and then maybe the most important, if you're building something cool and you want to share it with this group or with this team, this can be a place for that. Don't share anything confidential. Don't do anything that would get you in any kind of gray area. But there's probably really incredible projects that you all are working on that you could abstract a little bit and share with this group, and we could all learn from. And maybe your coworkers want to come, and as this group kind of continues to grow and build, our goal is to listen to you guys and be a service to Louisville, to you all individually, and see what we can do to make this thing work. And every once in a while, buy some drinks. Okay, I'm done. Nick, here we go to the topic at hand. There's bagels, there's water, the bathrooms are over there.
Yeah.
Do you guys need anything?
Bagels, if you all are not trying to save room for Feast after this. A few stickers, pins up at the top, and at the end, we'll be giving away a mystery item. All right, so thank you all for coming out to this very first one. I tried to pick a topic that was new and interesting and would pull people in, even if they weren't, necessarily in the AI ML field. So I want to talk tonight about AutoML. So I'm sure all of you all have talked to data scientists, AI ML engineers. That work can be pretty daunting. The nice thing about some of these AutoML libraries, it's very quick, very easy to get data that you have that's totally raw, that you pull from one of your databases, that you pull from a place like Kaggle competitions, you can delve into these frameworks and get started without having to have a ton of that background knowledge. So it's great if you're wanting to work on some of your own projects, or if you're wanting to kind of bootstrap something at a company you're already at. So it's worth mentioning, the ML stack on AWS is pretty broad and pretty deep. Down at the bottom are kind of all of the foundational things that allow us to do all the cool stuff on top. So we build and support things like TensorFlow, PyTorch, MXNet. We have dedicated chips like Inferentia and Trainium to help you or help support any of your deep learning activities. And of course, all of this runs on top of EC2 and serverless that if you're familiar with AWS, you already have some experience with. On top of that, and what we're going to focus on mostly tonight is Amazon SageMaker. So SageMaker is a pretty big umbrella. It covers everything from that initial labeling of your data and data prep all the way through deploying your model into production. We're going to focus tonight on just the studio IDE itself. So how do you get in? How do you actually start writing some code, training your model, getting your hands dirty? After I run through this, I do have a lab environment set up. So if you all brought laptops, I've got login credentials. You all can jump on, play around. That lab environment will be up until I think it's tomorrow evening, like 10 or 11 o'clock. So if you don't have time to play around with it tonight, feel free to play around with it tomorrow evening, and I'll give you a repo with some code you can pull it down to kind of get started with it. So on top of that are the like out of the box, just works, fully managed AI services. So things like recognition if you want to do computer vision, transcribe if you need to actually transcribe live audio. You have Comprehend if you need to do analysis on text. You want to do things like sentiment analysis, key phrase analysis, anything like that. So worth mentioning that just to kind of level set on what we do offer. So a quick introduction to SageMaker itself. Down there in the bottom corner, you have a quick look at what the Studio IDE itself looks like. The whole point of SageMaker is give you that integrated workbench and IDE, so everything that you're going to do is all in one place. You're not jumping to multiple places inside AWS console. It's going to abstract and manage all of your infrastructure for you, so you're no longer deploying Kubernetes clusters to put models on. You're not bringing up EC2 instances to do your training jobs. All of that's done for you and kind of hidden behind the scenes. And lastly is that managed tooling aspect. So you have things like debugger, a profiler, tools to analyze bias both on your incoming data as well as your models that you put out production. Again, all in that one spot. Tonight we're going to be playing in the notebooks themselves. I'm going to be leveraging built-in algorithms in SageMaker. So again, if you're at all familiar with that field, the algorithm itself can be pretty daunting unless you're just grabbing an algorithm off the shelf that you're going to use. So we will be just using the built-in algorithm. We're also going to explore SageMaker Autopilot, which is our first AutoML framework that we're going to look at. And we'll take a look at SageMaker experiments, which help you track the different parameters and runs of your model that you're trying to train. So SageMaker Studio is going to be the main thing that we focus on tonight. I won't go into a ton of details about it. I've talked a little bit about it already, and we'll get to see a good hands-on demo after this. One thing that is worth mentioning in SageMaker with the built-in algorithms that it supports, there are, last I checked, 15 that are built-in, ready to go, ready for you to use. And these are the type of prediction problems that you can use for it. So it's easy to say, well, it scores, for instance, XGBoost, which we'll be looking at tonight. But with that, you can do regression or classification problems. If you wanted to do something like clustering, you would have both k-means and k-nearest neighbor supported out of the box as a built-in algorithm. So there are two parts of the actual AutoML that we're going to talk about tonight. The first one is SageMaker Autopilot. So this is a built-in feature of SageMaker itself. It accepts only tabular data, so CSV type data, database dumps. You don't have to do any feature engineering. You don't have to do any prep work on it. You can, but the nice thing about it is you can pull that raw data, hand it over directly to Autopilot. It's going to do some of that feature engineering. It's going to do some of that data analysis for you up front. Pick what it thinks is the best and run with it. Once it's done, you'll be able to explore it. It'll give you some information and some description about which features it thought was most important for your model moving forward. You can open up a notebook that it will generate for you, so you can do additional data processing if you want to. But again, the nice thing about it is you can just kick it over to it and it'll pick it up and run. Autopilot will then work on creating your model. So right now it supports Linear Learn and XGBoost, but we'll try both of those models. It will pick which one that it thinks is the right one and then start doing some of that hyperparameter tuning. So I think XGBoost has something like a dozen knobs that you can turn to try to fine tune what you want your models to look like. Part of this model creation process is going to be it's going to walk through those parameters, turn those knobs for you automatically, and try to find a good balance for whatever your objective score is. Like if you want, if you're most interested on accuracy or false negatives, things like that, you can tell it exactly what you're looking for. It'll try to tune those knobs for you and get kind of a happy medium. Of course, as it's doing that, it will expose all of those runs in what are called experiments. So you can have it run 10, 20, 50 different jobs trying to tune those models for you. You can view all of those different runs. You can see how each one of them performed. You can even, if you disagree with what that final model that it chose was, you can pick one of the other models, create a notebook, or deploy it directly to production to start playing around with it. So show of hands, how many people have tried to do something in the AI/ML space? Okay, a couple. So it's not easy, right? I did some computer vision when I was in college. A lot of my time was spent on step number 1, data preparation. We got tons and tons of images, all of them that had to be looked at by hand to make sure they were good quality, make sure they had the features that I wanted, make sure they had, back then, a lot of the work was around edge detection, make sure they had good solid edges so we could try to figure out what was in that image. Even now, as I'm playing with more toy examples, in my current role, a lot of that raw data that you're getting, for example, the one we're going to be using tonight is looking at housing data off of a Kaggle competition. That data is pretty noisy. It has a lot of stuff in there that you don't necessarily need. It has a lot of missing values. It has rows that are duplicated, can throw off your models that you're going to build. There is a ton of time that you can sink just in step number 1. Step number 2 can be pretty straightforward unless you're writing your own algorithm. If you're using a built-in algorithm like in SageMaker, or if you're going to use something off the shelf like XGBoost, AutoGluon, linear regression, most of those algorithms are already written. You can find copies of the code, bring them in, feed it your data, you're good to go. So number 3 is the other place that tends to be a huge time sink, and that is turning all those knobs to make sure you're getting the results that you want. So do I turn 5 knobs at one time? Do I turn 1 knob until I'm happy with that, then turn the next knob? And when I'm happy with that, go back to knob 1? There are a ton of parameters that you can tweak and play with, and changing them slightly can make a drastic difference on your end model. So step 1 and 3 tend to be really in I would say my experience, the worst times that I have. That's when I want to close my laptop and throw it out the window, is when I'm stuck in number 1 doing data processing, because for some reason halfway through the data set most of the values are null and I don't understand why. So SageMaker really tries to step in and make those incredibly painful processes a little less painful. So we're talking about specifically SageMaker Autopilot. You're going to tell it, is this a classification problem? Is this a regression problem? It's going to pick which algorithm it thinks is going to run best for that. It's going to go through that data pre-processing step. So if you have a bunch of textual data, it will try to convert it into categorical data. If you have a bunch of categorical data, it will try to do things like something called one-hot encoding. So changing a multiple choice field into basically a binary, is this thing or not? And lastly, hyperparameter tuning. That is all the switches and knobs that you can turn to try to make your algorithms a little bit better. So if you're not in the AWS ecosystem, or maybe you don't want to, tie yourself to SageMaker directly, you want to be able to move this to a different platform, AutoGluon is an excellent option. It is fairly new. It is an open source project designed by AWS Labs, provided open source on GitHub, free to use. It's very similar to Autopilot in a lot of respects. And the nice thing about AutoGluon is it's not limited to just XGBoost and Linear Learner. It does bring in some of that deep learning capability. So if you think that a simple XGBoost model or linear regression model may not fit your problem, and you need to get into more like a neural network, AutoGluon can help you there. So it's going to still help in a lot of the same ways. It's going to do some data processing for you. It's going to try out multiple models on top of your data. And it's still going to do that hyperparameter. Has anybody had a chance to play with either Autopilot or AutoGluon? Yeah. What did you do with it, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm machine learning engineer.
Oh, well. We should have worked much harder on the AWS plants in the audience. So where Autopilot is good for classification or regression problems, AutoGluon does expand to a few different areas. So you do have the ability to do like time series forecasting, as well as tabular prediction on your like CSV data sets. Also comes with some image prediction capability, object detection, if you need to do work like that. So get out of here tonight. I've sold you on SageMaker. Clearly I have. It's a fun tool to play around with. You want to get started, never done AI ML before, you want something to go on. You'll have my repo, which I'll throw on at the end of this slide deck. We also offer something called SageMaker Jumpstart. So that's going to be several different pre-built like solution categories, things like computer vision, time series forecasting, with solutions in code all ready to go. So when you spin up SageMaker, you're going to land on this nice little launcher page. It's going to ask you, do you want to create a brand new project, or do you want to jump into one of these Jumpstart projects? So with these Jumpstart projects, if you want to do something like customer churn, computer vision, personalization, fraud detection, demand forecasting, they're going to have some sample use cases there with data ready to go. You open these up, everything you need is going to be there for you to walk through this toy example. And within each one of those, so for example, the fraud detection. One of the example use cases is detecting malicious users or malicious transactions. And of course, the most popular one people think of with fraud detection is detecting a fraudulent financial transaction. So in each category, there are a few sample projects there for you to dive into. All right, we're doing perfectly on time. So it's demo time. I do ask you bear with me. This is the first time I've had this laptop out of house.
make a sacrifice.
I was running late this evening. I did not do that. If Demogorgon likes bagels, we have some extra. I'm shocked it even connected to Wi-Fi without a problem. So already doing better than I expected. But we are going to talk about something called Data Wrangler to help you do some data processing. We are going to look at a hash scoring Kaggle notebook that I pulled directly off their site, really just for illustration purposes. I will show you my significantly lower scoring notebook that does far less work than that high scoring notebook does. Again, just to show you the difference. Great notebook, the amount of work involved with it. Pretty crap notebook with still a lot of work in it. And then the two AutoML options that perform just as well as my crap notebook, if not better, and took me far less time to actually do.
Maybe a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Is there a good place to get maybe test data sets to learn from? So, like, I saw one of the was computer vision. You know, maybe you're trying to do a very simple model where you're trying to detect a particular object in a picture, like all the pictures that contain a boat, something like that. Is there any good open source repos or places to get data sets?
Absolutely. I forget one that I always use for the images. AWS AIML guy in the back. Can you help me out with that? Good open source location for image data set. Yeah, in Kaggle. What about image data sets? There's a
I'm sure they have.
MNIST?
I'm sure they have.
Yeah, they do have two. MNIST is a good one. I can get you a better one for images, but then again, Kaggle is also a great one. They have tons of different competitions and tons of just open source data sets that are provided by the competition host as well as individual members.
Okay, thank you.
I will get you a better answer on the image one though, because I know there's a good one that I use for that pretty regularly, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. All right. So if you have a laptops. Yes. One person in the back, one person in the front. That's it.
I'll pull it out.
All right. So this is the place you can pull down code if you want to follow along. I'll give everybody a minute as I get my demo screen set up here. I'm sorry? Yes, it should be up through tomorrow. Yep. All right, everybody got the GitHub address? Am I going to move off the screen? All right, moving off. So if you scan the QR code or go to the URL down there at the bottom, that will send you to the AWS Lab Sandbox environment. All right.
Yes, just keep going.
No problem.
Is that okay?
You can't just talk. That's not. But I loaded the
right, if you're wanting to play along in the sandbox environment, you go to dashboard event engine .run/login. You put in this hash code. Give everybody a minute to get that typed in.
Oh, yeah.
All right, you're on this page, you hit and the easiest way to go is email a one-time passcode. You get to that page, you put in your email address.
Dude, for real. You should have told me that before I signed up for it. I didn't know it's something it's like super quick.
All right, once you get logged in, you should see this screen. Best to make sure you're doing this in a incognito window, or private browse or whatever Firefox or Edge offers, just to make sure that you are not going to accidentally log into either your private AWS account or your company's AWS account. You don't want to wake up tomorrow to see you have a huge bill from SageMaker. So at that point, you can click on AWS console here at the top and open directly into the console. So if you're wanting to follow along, kind of get your hands on the code as we're walking through, that'll get you in. If you have any problems, throw up a hand. We'll try to help you as best we can. And I will move on to the actual demo portion. All right, so this is our first look at SageMaker Studio. That's probably far too small, isn't it? Is that better? When you're first logging in, you'll likely land on this page. It's the launching page. It's going to ask you if you want to stand up a new project, if you just want to open up a notebook, a terminal instance. You can also get to the jumpstart models and algorithms here at the top. So for the actual demo, I should not have to run anything, thankfully. I think everything's already been run and the output should be here. So this first notebook that we're going to take a look at is called Half Scoring Shared Notebook. So shamelessly took this right off the website. It was one of their high scoring ones that didn't just manually label the data. So as you can see, this is a pretty impressive notebook. There is a lot of work that somebody went into doing this. So they're importing their data. They're taking a look at what their columns are. They're looking at how many non-null entries are there out of, looks like 2,930. As you can see, as I'm scrolling down here, some of these do definitely have some null values in there that would have to be taken care of before you tried to do any modeling on it. They dump out top 5 rows here for you to take a look at, just to see what some of the data actually is. It's probably worthwhile looking at. I thought I had a data description here. This data description.txt file will tell you about what each class is and what some of the possible values for each one are. So you have information like, is this a 1-story? Is this a 1.5? Is it a split or multi-level? What is the zoning like for it? Is the street gravel or paved? Is there an alley attached to it? So there are several columns for each row, several data points for each row that they provided you with. Now, a lot of these are really just garbage. So condition 1 is a good example of that. Proximity to various conditions. This is not really that helpful. So it tells me that it could be close to a railroad, it could be close to a feeder street, but they're so disparate and so different. I know just by looking at this, that's probably not a very good feature. So there's a good chance I just want to drop that straight away. Information like house style, is this 1-story, is this 1.5 story? We saw something very similar to this at the top. So we have 2 data points that we see now that are very, very similar. We probably don't need both of those. It's probably going to confuse our model if we have 2 features that are telling us basically the same thing. We have overall quality. That's probably a really good one. So is the house in very poor condition or very excellent condition? That probably influences the house price pretty significantly. We see overall condition. What rates the overall condition of the house? Is that significantly different than overall quality? Probably not. Probably want to take a look at that again. If it's 2 things that are telling me basically the same thing, I don't want to feed both of those features into my model. So that's an explanation. I won't go through everything of what is available in the data set. We'll come back here and look through a little bit more of what they're doing. So the first graph he has here is looking at the distribution of sale prices. It's not quite normal, but it doesn't look too terribly skewed. I'm sure if you're an expert data scientist, it would probably worry you a little bit. I wouldn't worry about it. I'd probably just go ahead and see what my models look like without trying to alter that or hem that in too much. We have a correlation matrix down here. So before doing anything with the data, he is trying to see if 2 data points within this data are very similar, like overall condition and what was the overall quality. So you expect those to be highly correlated. Anything that's highly correlated, you want to throw out. So at this point, he's doing that analysis to get a handle on which items would be. So if it's a very light color, like down here at the bottom, it's probably a feature you don't want to get rid of. If it's a very strong color, like the red or the blue here, those are good candidates for throwing out one of those 2 data points. Tons more charts, getting an idea of how the data is actually distributed. Is it normally distributed? Is it heavy at one end versus another? Again, I'm not going to delve into this because this is really this is a master's class on data science and feature engineering just all in itself. The point that I really wanted to make when bringing this up is this is a ton of work that somebody went through to get this notebook ready to just run the actual model on. So all of this work here is data processing. All of that's still data processing. Well, that's commented out, but more data processing. More data processing. So at this point, we haven't even tried to train a model yet. So now we'll jump over to my not great notebook. So I lifted heavily from some existing notebooks to help me get up and running with this as I was playing with this data set. If you run through this, I do some setting of my hyperparameters there at the top. Then I start doing some of my data exploration. Some of the things that I'm doing here are similar to what was done in the other notebook. I'm looking at correlation for my features there. I'm taking a shortcut, not worrying necessarily about the distribution of data, quickly throwing out any features that have a very high correlation with anything else and don't seem like they are overly important. So I quickly narrow down my set of features to this selection here. Still quite a bit of code to actually get to that point. But at this point, I'm actually ready to ship my code over to an XGBoost algorithm. So this notebook, the SM XGBoost notebook, far less data prep, far worse score than that other person got, to be fair, but got to the actual modeling and training portion a whole lot faster. So once I've got all my data ready, I throw it out to an S3 bucket. When using SageMaker, it's always best practice to stage all of your data into S3. It's going to allow those algorithms to pull that data in a lot faster and can either chunk it up and can also chunk it up and parallelize it to make your models train more quickly. So at this point, I'm throwing that to the built-in XGBoost that I'm pulling here from essentially a Docker repository. I'm setting some basic hyperparameters and I'm letting it run. So this got, sorry. This got a pretty decent score when I submitted it. Not great by any stretch of the imagination, but the interesting part is really when we get over to the autopilot and auto glue on examples. So here I'm setting up basically configuration in this cell for autopilot. I create my AutoML job and then it starts running. So most of the output here is going to be just a continual poll to see what that AutoML job is actually doing. So as you can see, we're going through feature engineering, we're going through model tuning. It hit the limit of how many models it will train, and then it's generating some explainability reports and insight reports for us to go back and look at. So if I jump here over on the side, I can see that these are all of the experiments that I've run. If I open up one of these, this is what autopilot ended up running for me. So there are, what is that, about a dozen training jobs there that ran for me. I can open up each one of these. I can look at the final value of my objective metric, which was, I think, accuracy, was about 85%. That's not bad for, what is this, 5 cells in a Python notebook. 85%, I did very little work. I sank very little time into it. Got 85% accuracy score on my test data. That's livable if you're wanting to do a small proof of concept or just prove out that your idea is feasible and you want to move forward with it. Yep.
Is it check whether or not that your data is in balance or not? Because that accuracy would be good, but it is in balance and not basically.
So it should be, and that should be part of these transform jobs that happen. If we open one of those up, I didn't turn that on for these. So that should be part of the data pre-processing stuff that it's doing.
It outputs the pre-processing for S3 bucket. You can go look in there for what it did. If you disagree with it, you can always just add it down or anything like that. Okay.
We can also view the parameters that it set for the model. So it chose an XGBoost model, and these are the parameters that it ran for this specific experiment. And I think this was the one that it chose. So if you wanted to take this, start working with XGBoost on your own, you can generate a notebook from this, or take these parameters and start working on them yourself. And lastly is the auto glue on example. So again, I have my train and test data sets. On this one, loaded them in directly to the notebook. They're not going to be streamed from S3. And then I've opened up a tabular predictor for auto gluon, and it is off and running. So again, in just these 4 cells, I was able to get something up and running quickly. It will go through here, and in the logs will tell you some about what it's doing. So it will tell you that it's going through and filling any features that did not have a value. It's going to go through and identify what type of features you have. So you have some floats, some ints, some objects, some categories. It's then going to pick which ones it thinks are strongest and start running that model against it. So again, in less than a dozen lines, AutoGluon was able to take our data without us having to do anything with it, was able to pick a model that ran reasonably well. I don't remember the scores on this one at the final accuracy score. But when I submitted this test run, it got better than both Autopilot and my XGBoost algorithm that I put together. Any questions on Autopilot or AutoGluon, either one?
I think that'd be helpful, maybe talk about the difference between them. I know you mentioned that like auto one give better accuracy and it looks like the autopilot element is like basically. What are the differences between them? What these ones are doing?
So AutoGluon, if you need more than and if you have a different perspective, please jump in. If you're going to do more than just simple classification or regression, AutoGluon is probably a good one to start with, since SageMaker Autopilot only offers those 2. Honestly, for as little time as it takes to run both of them, it's a good situation that you could run your data through both and see which one gives you better results, even if you're doing a classification problem that both of them could tackle. It never hurts to look and see what both of them are able to output. Since Autopilot does just use XGBoost and linear regression, you still may get a better output from AutoGluon, since it's looking at a wider assortment of algorithms that it could try out on your data. Do you have anything you want to add on to that? I'm sorry? Yeah.
How resource expensive this SageMaker when it comes to things? Wondering how much you're be able to run this.
So all of these are going to run on EC2 instances in the background. By default, there are these fast launching instances that are available to you. So you can get a general purpose. You can get one with the G4's offer GPUs, or you can get the larger compute or memory intensive instances. You can also open this up if you don't want the fast launch and get a much larger collection of EC2 instances. That's just for running your notebook. When you're actually talking about the training, if we look at like Autopilot is a good example, you're going to tell it, you're going to tell it what size machine you want it to run on, as well as how many instances. So if you have a pretty short job that finishes in a couple hours, it may not be worth bumping up that instance count. If you have something that's going to run for a day, you can often save money by increasing that instance count and then run it for a shorter amount of time. Overall, just running the notebook, this 2 CPU, 4 gigs, I was fine running all 4 of these notebooks without any sort of problems. So that does bring up a good point worth mentioning. When you're training, all that training is done on an ephemeral cluster. It's spun up and spun down. So if somewhere on here it says billable training time was, say, 180 seconds. That's all you're paying for resource-wise. That's not true for any running instances that you have here. So if you were doing this in your own AWS account tonight and you forgot to shut down this EC2 instance, you would get charged for that until you remember to go back in and shut it down. So that is one caveat when you're running those notebooks. It's always good when you're wrapping up for the day to come in, shut it down. But as far as the training goes, that's automatically deprovisioned for you as soon as your training's over. Was everybody able to get into the lab section okay that gave it a try?
Yeah, I got the code.
Okay. Well, if you have the GitHub repo address, it has this slide deck in it, so it has the address for the lab environment on that as well. It does not have the hash code. Does anybody need that again, or did everybody manage to write that down or get a picture of it? All right. So that lab environment will be up and running again, should be through tomorrow night. So feel free to, yeah.
I have a slightly unrelated question for us.
Sure.
Behind the scenes, what type of parameter tuning is it doing?
It gives,
It's not doing grid search.
it has two different options. The default and the preferred one is a Bayesian search. If you want to run more in parallel, then it resorts to, I think, just random search.
Do you specify which parameter one is for?
You do. As part of, it looks like a JSON input like this does. You'll tell it which parameters and then what range and what step you want it to take. So if you just want to do 2 or 3 instead of all of them, and you want to take tiny little steps or giant steps, you configure all of that and then let it loose. Any other questions? I hope everybody found that useful, helpful. Hopefully it was not, it did not feel like a, crash course in data analytics or data science. Hopefully it seems a little more accessible than that. So we've got a few minutes left before we wrap up. It's a good time to talk about what are you all interested in seeing next. So we've got a few people, as you saw on the slides, lined up from the AWS side that talk about things like security, networking, resiliency, training certification, general career development. How did we manage to land at AWS? Are those the right topics? Are there other things you all want to hear about?
I think for me personally, probably more CDK focused.
Was it you that said you knew Wes?
Probably what?
Did you know a gentleman named Wes?
I think that was me.
Okay, sorry, somebody else. Yes, we have a gentleman that has already offered to do a CDK talk, so that's great.
Yep. Yeah, sweet. Yep. Are you all from area as well? Okay. I'm going to know each other. So we can tell if both of you what else do you get? Or anything, even out there, you say, I want to upload this one or for whole. Actually, how do people hear about this? People hear about this via Google Text Live or via MeetUp, or we got notification through our AWS Slack channel. So it might be nice to, like you said, with topics, put topics out where people could thumb them up. Or what's the best way to do that?
I think I can send a survey out to everybody that's registered on the MeetUp page.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, happy to do that.
One point of interest, hopefully you're here. We're having a strong focus on Kubernetes right now. I'm using Kubernetes runtime environments.
Sure.
Because it's coming away from VM as possible, and again, that's slow. So I'd love to hear hear more about MeetUp and, we have more space.
Absolutely.
Your question about deciphering which Kubernetes offering to pick, or you decided that now you want to do a deep on a particular. So you did mention KS.
We want to get started with KS. We are running, workloads right now, actually, in other providers like with the AKS, GKD. We've got one team that's running some, very basic workloads at GKS, but they're kind of like a little satellite over. We're looking to potentially make that a much broader offering for some staff. So, wanted to make sure that we kind of get that enterprise class